Hello everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're diving into a brutal twist in Lie to Diep and James's story. After dreaming of James running for his life, Diep wakes up to a terrifying reality. His powerful father hasn't stopped at all. He's quietly using forged signatures, secret accounts, and even the authorities to turn their love into a crime. While James is questioned somewhere in a locked room and Diep is forced to choose. Betray him to save herself, or stand beside him and risk losing everything. The big question is, can one small shop owner and her stubborn love outplay a man who controls the system itself? If this kind of emotional, twist-filled drama pulls you in, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. Brother James, run! Run! The scream tears out of Diep's throat before she even knows she's making a sound. In the dream, she's holding a phone, screen cracked with white light. And on the other end, James is sprinting down a narrow hallway lined with metal doors. Papers are flying everywhere. Inspection forms, bank slips, stamped documents with the words "workshop account" and Xuan Van flashing in red. They twist in the air and turn into ropes, wrapping around his wrists, his ankles, his chest. Behind him, heavy footsteps. Not the clumsy steps of hired thugs, but the measured, echoing steps of someone in polished shoes. James's father, half-shadowed, face unreadable. He doesn't run. He just walks, and the floor seems to tilt in his favor. "Diep, it's okay!" James calls into the phone, breathless, still trying to smile. "Don't worry." The hallway slams shut like an elevator door. The signal dies. The last thing she sees is his hand reaching out for her through the screen, and her own reflection, small and helpless, trapped on the other side. "James!" she cries, and wakes up, sitting bolt upright in the dark. The room is still. No metal doors, no flying papers, just the thin curtain moving with the fan and the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Diep's heart punches against her ribs, sweat dampening her hairline. For a moment, she doesn't know where she is. Then the familiar shapes settle back into place. The dent in the wardrobe, Nye's little school bag hanging on a nail, the corner where she keeps the basket of folded clothes. It was just a dream, but just a dream won't slow her heartbeat. Her throat is tight. Her hands are still curled like she's grabbed for a phone that wasn't there. She reaches for the real one on the low table. No missed calls, no new messages. The last voice clip from James is still pinned at the top. He knows. Don't fold. She listens to 1 second of it, just to feel his timbre in the dark, then stops herself before she sinks into repeat. "It's okay," she whispers to the empty air, as much to herself as to him. "You're okay. You have to be." Unease has been sitting in her chest for days now, like a stone she can't swallow. Ever since the inspection, ever since the father stood outside the shop and smiled that small, satisfied smile and said, "I told them to be gentle," she's had the rotten feeling that gentleness was never his goal. Everyone around her wanted to believe the worst was over. "He went too far," Aunt Hoa had said. After the officer talked to him, "He'll be quiet now." Even the brother, clutching his new guilt like a hot coal, had said, "He won't risk more. You stood up in public. He has to be careful." But in the dream, the father wasn't careful. He was calculated. He let the papers do the chasing so his hands could stay clean. Diep swings her legs off the bed and kneels on the cool tile, fingers lacing together automatically. She hasn't prayed this way in a long time. Formal words, bowed head, but the dream has scraped something raw in her. "God," she murmurs, voice shaking. If there's any order in this mess, please let James be safe. Give him health. Give him a clear path. If I have to carry more trouble, let it come to me, not him. You see everything. You know what his father is doing, even if no one else does. Please, arrange it the way you think is right. Just don't let the worms eat everything we planted. The last words slip out before she can catch them. A half-remembered line from church, from some old sermon about greed and rot. It sounds strange in her own voice, but it fits. Paperwork, accounts, concerned reports. They're all different kinds of worms. She finishes with a soft amen, and for a heartbeat the room is quiet in a different way. Not peaceful, exactly, but held. Her unease doesn't disappear, but it has something to lean on. Diep stands, moves to the window, pulls the curtain aside. The lane is still half asleep. One dog noses through a pile of leaves. A motorbike coughs in the distance. The sky has that gray-blue tone right before dawn. Where are you now? She wonders, eyes on the faint line of the canal beyond the roofs. Warehouse? Bus? Office? Are you running in real life, or only in my dreams? Her reflection looks back at her, eyes tired but not broken. She straightens her shoulders. Fear is loud, but so is the noodle pot when it boils. Morning is coming, whether she's ready or not. The alarm on her phone vibrates against the table. Time to be ordinary. In the kitchen, she lights the stove and drops dry noodles into a pot. The hiss of water over metal cutting through the last threads of the nightmare. Steam rises, wrapping around her face like a warm hand. She cracks an egg, slices a bit of green onion, adds them to the pot. Simple noodle soup, hot and filling, fuel for small legs, strength for a day at school. Footsteps shuffle down the hall. Miss Diep? Nye's voice, still sleepy. In here, Diep calls, forcing her tone into a lightness she doesn't quite feel. Nye appears in the doorway, hair sticking up on one side, eyes half closed. Smells good, she says, sniffing the air. Of course, Diep laughs. If it didn't smell good, you'd pretend you weren't hungry. They sit at the small table, the bowls steaming between them. For a moment, it's just the clink of chopsticks, the quiet slurp of noodles, the soft breathing of a house that knows how to hold two people. Then, mid-bite, Nye glances up with that careful look kids get when they're about to ask for something. Miss Diep. Can I take a day off school today? Diep pauses, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. There it is, the little wish pushing against the big world. Why do you want a day off? She asks, not angry, just curious. Nye twists a noodle around her chopsticks. I'm tired, she says, and when I have a day off on the weekend, you let me go out and play. Diep smiles, but there's firmness under it. Weekends are for playing, weekdays are for learning. If you go to school and study well, you'll have a good future. Remember? Nye pouts. But just one day. Listen, Diep says gently, leaning forward. You know how our shop has to open every morning so people remember we're here? School is like that for your brain. If you close too many mornings, customers, knowledge, will go somewhere else. Nye considers this, eyes narrowed. So my brain is like a shop? Yes, Diep laughs. And you are the owner. You decide if it's full or empty. When you're older, you might want to do big things. If your brain shop is empty because you were lazy now, you'll regret it later. A beat. Then Nye sighs dramatically. Okay, I'll go. Warmth and pressure share the table for a second. Her small desire to rest. Diep's big desire to protect a future she can't see yet. The noodles between them are a quiet metaphor for both. Simple fuel now, complicated strength later. A few more bites pass, comfortable. Then Nye drops her next wish. "But," she ventures, "I want Uncle James to take me to school." Diep's chest tightens. She keeps her face soft. "Uncle James is very busy with work, remember? Only when he has time can he take you." "But I miss him," Nye says, matter of fact. "When he took me before, he told funny stories on the bike." "I miss him too," Diep admits, the words heavier than the steam. "A lot, but we have to wait. When he comes home, I'll tell him to take you to school. Okay? Promise?" "Promise." Nye brightens a little. "So today you take me, and later, after we eat, you call Uncle James and ask him when he's coming home?" Diep nods. "Yes. After I drop you off, I'll try calling." The promise hangs in the air like a small bridge. Between now and later, between this little kitchen and whatever room James is in, between the dream that chased him and the real world that's pretending to be calm. Inside, Diep's thoughts are less calm. What if he doesn't pick up? What if the reason he hasn't answered isn't just bad signal? What if his father has tightened the wires again? But she doesn't let any of that leak into her tone. Instead, she reaches over and tucks a loose strand of hair behind Nye's ear. "Eat up," she says. "You need strength if you're going to own that brain shop." They laugh. For a moment, the house is exactly what it looks like. 2 bowls, 2 people, 1 simple morning. The sun slides higher, washing the walls in a soft gold that almost looks like peace. Almost. Because when they step out later, school bag on Knee's back, phone in Diep's pocket, the lane will have whispers waiting. And somewhere, just where the street bends toward the main road, a black car will be parked with engine off, like a thought that hasn't decided whether to move yet. But for now, there's just this. A dream that still clings. A prayer that still echoes. A bowl that's almost empty. And a promise to call a man who might already be standing exactly where her nightmare left him. On the way back from school, Diep walks faster than Knee's little legs can go. She forces herself to slow down, to match the child's rhythm, to let the moment stay normal for just a few more steps. At the gate, she kneels, smooths Nye's hair, and fixes the strap of the bag. "Remember," she says, "listen to the teacher, and don't sleep in class just because you wanted a day off." Nye giggles. "I'll stay awake. Then when Uncle James comes back, I can tell him everything I learned." The words land like a promise Diep didn't give, but can't take back. "Yes," she says softly. "Tell him everything." She watches until Nye disappears into the sea of uniforms, then turns away, hand already reaching into her pocket for the phone. The lane outside the school is busy. Parents, bikes, carts. But at the far end, half blocked by a tree, a black sedan sits with its engine off. Again. She doesn't look too long, doesn't give it the satisfaction. She just tucks her chin and walks toward the main road, thumb hovering over James's name. She calls. 1 ring, 2, 3. It clicks. No voice, just air. Then, faintly, the scrape of a chair, the rustle of paper, the buzz of a fluorescent light. Her heart jumps into her throat. "James," she whispers. A voice answers, but it's not his. It's cold, official, male. "State your full name for the record." Her spine goes rigid. Then, layered over it, James's voice, tight, like his jaws clenched. "James," he says, "you know my name already. Do you admit that you were aware of—" The call distorts, like someone's hand just covered the microphone. A muffled scrape, then a rush of static. For a moment, she hears nothing. Then his voice, closer to the phone now, almost a hiss. "Diep? I'm here," she says, gripping the phone hard enough to hurt. "Where are you? What are they?" "Listen," he says, cutting her off, breath jagged. If anyone asks, you didn't know about any accounts, any transfers. You were just running the shop. Do you understand?" "I already told them that," she says, panic rising. "At the district." "I know," he says. "They're trying to shape it differently. Don't sign anything you don't read. Don't—" A door slams somewhere near him. The cold voice returns, sharper. "We said no calls." The line goes dead. Diep stands in the middle of the sidewalk, traffic moving around her like she's a rock in a river. Someone bumps her shoulder. She barely feels it. The last scraps of the dream, James running down that metal hallway, papers chasing him like knives, rush back at once. Only now the papers have faces and voices and government stamps. This isn't a dream warning her anymore. It's reality catching up. She forces herself to breathe, to walk, to put one foot in front of the other until she's back at the shop. The sign, Diep and James, hangs exactly as it did yesterday. The lock feels the same under her hand. Inside, the shelves are still full. The air still carries the faint sweetness of yesterday's cakes. Nothing looks different. Everything is. She pulls down the little metal stool behind the counter and sits, elbows on her knees, phone dangling between her fingers. The father's offer replays in her mind. "Walk away from him publicly, and I'll make this go away." The officer's question, "Why do you care? You could walk away clean." James's voice, "If one of us has to be buried by his mess, let it be both or neither." She feels something hot and bitter rise in her chest. Anger, helplessness, a disgust so sharp it's almost physical. Not at James, at his father. At the way he stands outside the mess he made and calls it perspective. A knock at the open door makes her jump. It's the brother, holding a plastic bag with screws and a measuring tape. "Thought we could finish that back shelf," he says. "You okay? You look like you swallowed a stone." "James called," she says. "From somewhere. They're questioning him, using the account, using the story you helped build." His face goes gray. He sets the bag down slowly. "I thought, when your father-in-law stopped sending people, when he shifted to let the district handle it, I thought he was backing off." He laughs once, bitter. "He just moved the battlefield." "Yes," Diep says. "And now he's trying to turn the law into his new gang." The brother rubs his face. "I went by the office earlier," he admits, "to follow up on my own case. The clerk let something slip. The family dispute file. It's gone. Withdrawn. Officially, there is no complaint from you against him anymore." He looks up, eyes full of apology. "Your protection evaporated the second he didn't need it." "So what are they using now?" she asks, already knowing. "A different file," he says. "Economic crime. Workshop account at the center. Every associated contact a potential pawn." He hesitates. They won't say it out loud, but someone is helping shape that narrative. Someone with connections up there. Someone whose son is now on the other end of a recorder in a fluorescent room, telling his name for the file. Diep feels the annoyance twist into full fury. Not the dramatic, shouting kind, the cold kind that focuses. "He's not just trying to separate us," she says slowly. "He's building a story where either James goes down with him as the loyal son who followed orders, or James betrays him by testifying. And then he uses that to paint us as ungrateful, greedy, climbing. She swallows. Either way, we're the stain. He's the victim. The brother's shoulders sag. He's always been good at turning mud into perfume when people are watching, he mutters. I should have known. Diep stands suddenly, the stool scraping the floor. I can't accept that, she says. I won't sit here and bake cakes while he rewrites who James is on paper. What are you going to do? The brother asks, a mix of fear and awe in his voice. Tell the story first, Diep says. All of it, not just to the district, to whoever will listen. Reporters, he guesses. Higher authorities, the internet? His tone is half hopeful, half terrified. Maybe all of them, she says. He's counting on us being small and quiet, on us being ashamed, on us wanting to hide because we're involved. If we let him keep the story in back rooms, he wins. If we drag it into sunlight, maybe he slips. The brother nods slowly. I'll back you, he says. I owe you that much. I can testify that I forged nothing for you, that he pulled my strings, that I was the one who took the deal, not you. You'll be in danger too, she warns. I already am, he shrugs. This way, at least I'm dangerous to someone who deserves it. They spend the next hour gathering, the photocopies from the district, the screenshots from the brother's phone, the notes Diep has filled with times, plates, names, the printouts from the cafe's camera, catching the sedan's plate more clearly now that the angle is fixed. Every little worm she's seen, every thread she's realized, had a hand pulling it. In the back of the shop, while Aunt Hoa watches the front and fusses over customers loudly, "Buy more, support our brave girl!" Diep props her phone against a jar and hits record. Hello, she begins, voice shaking slightly. My name is Lai Tu Diep. I sell cakes and rice and potatoes in a small lane. I opened a shop with my fiancé's name on it because we wanted a simple, legal future. This is the story of how his father and a few stamps are trying to turn us into criminals instead. She talks about the debt paid years ago, about the workshop promise, about the Juan van transfer, about the inspection, about the forged signature making her a beneficiary of money she never saw, about the interrogation where they dangled freedom like a toy if she would say James knew everything. She doesn't cry, she doesn't scream, she just lays out facts like ingredients one after another, knowing that alone they look harmless, but together they make something heavy. When she finishes, she sends the video to the brother, to the cafe owner, to James's mother, to one small local blogger who once bought sweets from her and said, "If you ever have a story, I'll listen." She hesitates before the last send. Then, heart-pounding, she forwards it to James with a single line. If they erase my words there, at least you'll have them here. There's no reply. Not yet. Evening slides in. Nye returns, full of stories about math and ships and a classmate who fell asleep anyway. The shop closes. The lane quiets. The black sedan doesn't appear this time, which somehow feels worse. Absence is its own threat. Late, when everyone is asleep, Diep goes to the shrine where she and James once left notes. The loose tile is still loose. She lifts it and tucks a folded scrap underneath, the way they used to. If they come for me, don't trade yourself to save me, it says. Fight beside me or wait for me. Don't let him turn us into his story. She replaces the tile, stands, looks up. The moon is there as always, cool and distant. It doesn't offer answers. It just watches. Somewhere, in a room lit by harsh white, James might be sitting at a table like the one she sat at, a recorder blinking red, a man in uniform asking, "Do you admit?" Somewhere else, James's father might be sipping tea, confident that his calculations are still 3 moves ahead. And here, a woman with flour under her nails and fear in her bones refuses to choose the easy betrayal. The ending doesn't come tonight. It hangs open, raw. Will the video spread or vanish? Will the officer believe her or file her away? Will James sign something to shield her or refuse and make the net close tighter? Will the father's wires snap or pull them all under? For now, there is only this: a shop with 2 names, a folder full of fragile truth, a father whose plan is bigger than anyone guessed, and a love stubborn enough to stand in front of all of it, saying quietly but clearly, "Not yet, not like this." After a terrifying dream of James running from papers and doors slamming shut, Diep wakes up shaken and prays desperately for his safety. Her unease lingers through a simple morning of noodles and school, where she gently pushes Nye to study, while both admit how much they miss James. On the way back, Diep calls him, only to hear his interrogation in the background and his rushed warning, "Don't sign anything, don't say you knew." She realizes James's father hasn't stopped. He's escalated, using forged signatures and the workshop account to drag them into an economic crime case. Offered a way out if she publicly abandons James, Diep refuses to fold. Instead, she gathers evidence, records a video telling the full story, and hides a note for James, choosing to stand with him even as the ending remains painfully uncertain.